You have 5 minutes. The words sliced through the marble lobby like a knife dragged across glass. His voice was sharp, loud enough for the tellers to pause their counting, loud enough for the guards by the door to stiffen. 5 minutes to disappear from a building she owned. The man leaning across the counter wasn't whispering. His jaw was tight, his finger pointed like a gavel about to strike. Behind him, a uniformed security officer shifted his weight, hand hovering close to his belt, as if danger was already decided. The other clerks avoided her eyes, but the message was clear: you don't belong here. She didn't flinch. She didn't plead. She simply lowered her gaze to the phone in her hand, the faint reflection of the gold logo on the wall shimmering across the screen. Heritage Community Bank. Her bank, a place she had kept deliberately quiet about owning, testing how the staff treated those who didn't arrive in designer armor. 5? She repeated, her tone calm, steady, carrying the weight of someone who'd heard worse and survived. She let the silence breathe, let the lobby feel it. Then slowly she said, "More than enough." Her briefcase rested by her side, initials AW embossed in brass. Not a luxury emblem, not a status symbol, just hers. She'd walked in alone, no entourage, no corporate badge, no fanfare. She wanted to know how they treated an ordinary black woman asking for access to her own account. And now, she had her answer. The manager's smirk widened, mistaking her poise for surrender. "Security will escort you out," he snapped, glancing at the guard. Phones buzzed at nearby desks. Whispers started to ripple. A young client near the corner raised his camera discreetly, the red light blinking as it captured every second of humiliation. But she wasn't humiliated. She was anchoring herself in the storm, the way she had at 24 when a teller accused her of forging a cashier's check, the way she had at 30 when her first investment was dismissed as luck. The same script, different stage. The air shifted. The orchids by the marble wall stood still, but the atmosphere around her grew heavy, charged. She straightened her shoulders, eyes fixed on the man still pointing at her like she was a criminal. Her voice dropped, not loud, not rushed, but firm enough to still the whispering. "You don't want to count down those minutes," she said, "because when they're up, you'll regret every second." For a moment, the lobby froze. The guard blinked. The manager scoffed. The phones kept recording, and the woman at the center of it all remained silent, steady, and unshaken, as if 5 minutes was exactly what she needed to turn an entire bank upside down. The lobby had returned to its shallow rhythm, pens scratching, keyboards tapping, but the tension hadn't left. It hovered like static. The man in the navy suit still glared, his finger slowly curling back into a fist as though 5 minutes could shrink her into silence. She stood unmoved, a black blazer tailored but not flashy, dark slacks, modest heels, no diamond bracelet, no designer scarf. Her presence wasn't loud, it was deliberate. She had chosen this look the way generals choose their armor. Precise, stripped of decoration, impossible to misinterpret except by those determined not to see. Her name was Alexis Ward. At 43, she controlled more equity than the bank itself was worth on paper. But none of that was visible now. To the clerks at Heritage, she was just another customer to scrutinize, to stall, to dismiss. Identification. The younger teller at the far end, pale, hair pinned too tight, didn't ask so much as command. She leaned forward, lips curved into something less than a smile. Large transactions require extra steps. The pause was heavy. Extra steps. Everyone in earshot knew what that meant. Alexis slid her ID across the counter. Calm. Direct. The clerk pinched it between two fingers as if it might stain her skin, then turned to whisper with the manager. "You see what I'm saying?" The manager muttered, not quietly enough. "Doesn't add up. Doesn't look like she belongs here." A security guard shifted again, his posture rehearsed, his presence a warning. Two clients in line exchanged looks, one tilting a phone slightly, ready to record more if needed. The marble lobby wasn't silent anymore. It was buzzing, like a court before the verdict. Alexis didn't react. She remembered Atlanta, 24 years old, her first commission check clutched like proof of existence. They froze her account then, too, said the deposit was suspicious. She spent the night on the phone with managers who never apologized, never admitted they were wrong. That night had planted a seed, one that grew into ownership, into empire, and now here she was again, dressed down, judged up, repeating the cycle. The clerk cleared her throat, eyes narrowing. You'll need to verify the source of funds. She pushed the ID back across the counter, not even glancing at it. Alexis rested a hand on her briefcase. "Run my name," she said softly. The words landed heavier than a shout. They lingered, daring someone to refuse. The manager shook his head, smirk curling back. "Not without verification. This isn't a walk-in center." His tone carried the smugness of a man who believed policy was his shield, prejudice his weapon. In the corner, a young associate, barely 22, fresh tie, restless hands shifted uncomfortably. He had seen her name earlier on the system, checked it twice, but he stayed quiet, caught between truth and paycheck. The countdown had begun, not in minutes but in choices. And Alexis Ward, silent, steady, had already made hers. The hum of the lobby deepened. Keys tapped harder, pens paused midair. Every sound felt amplified, as if the marble walls themselves were listening. The manager adjusted his tie, his smirk sharpening. "Listen," he said, voice carrying across the floor. "We've had imposters before. People walk in off the street, claim they've got accounts, flash fancy cards, then disappear when the checks don't clear." He tilted his head toward Alexis. "Zamapeton," different face. The words hung like smoke. Across the lobby, a woman clutching her handbag drew it closer, eyes darting between Alexis and the teller. A young father bounced his toddler on his knee, whispering under his breath, "This doesn't look right." Alexis stayed motionless. Her ID still sat on the counter, ignored. Her calm was deliberate, a steady flame in a room trying to snuff her out. "Security," the manager called, flicking his hand like a conductor summoning brass. The guard stepped forward, broad shoulders, heavy boots clicking against the marble. He stopped just short of her, arms crossed, stance rigid. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. The young associate at the corner desk shifted again, his eyes locked on the screen he'd checked that morning. Alexis Ward, verified, owner access, executive level. But his voice stayed caged, trapped behind clenched teeth. "See?" the clerk whispered loudly enough for the nearest clients to hear. "Doesn't add up. No one like her carries tea." Alexis breathed in, slow, measured. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was steel coolin'. The manager leaned closer, lowering his voice but not his contempt. "You've got 5 minutes before we escalate. Police, fraud division, the works." His smile was cold. "You want that smoke?" From the corner, a phone light blinked red. Someone was recording again, the lens fixed on Alexis's F. Alexis remembered 30 years old. Los Angeles, a loan office. She had offered 30% more collateral than required. The officer still shook his head, called her high risk, his eyes saying more than his words ever could. That same look now burned across the manager's face. The orchids in the lobby trembled under the air conditioning, but 3 words, firm, unshaken. They sliced through the murmurs like a clean blade. The manna. But the guard's eyes flickered, just for a second. Doubt, uncertainty, the kind of hesitation that cracks authority. And in that crack, the storm was already starting to pour. The guard stayed planted at her side, hands clasped in front like a gate that wouldn't budge. The manager's smirk deepened, feeding off the silence. To him, silence meant surrender. To Alexis Ward, silence was strategy. She stood still, shoulders squared, breath even, eyes steady on the counter. The world might have mistaken that stillness for weakness, but in reality it was a fuse, burning slow, inevitable. Across the lobby, a phone tilted higher. The young man who'd been recording earlier raised it openly now, red light glaring like a witness. Beside him, an older woman whispered, "She hasn't raised her voice once." Her companion murmured back, "Doesn't matter. They've already decided." The junior associate by the side desk fidgeted, his tie slightly crooked. He leaned toward the clerk nearest him. "Her name's in the system. I saw it this morning." His voice was barely audible. The clerk shot him a look sharp enough to cut. "Keep quiet if you want to stay employed." He froze, trapped between truth and survival. Alexis closed her eyes briefly, a quiet flicker of memory rising. 16 years old, Charlotte, dressed in her Sunday best, waiting in a hotel lobby for her parents. A clerk approached, told her this area was for guests only, and escorted her outside like she was loitering. She had learned then what exile felt like. Decades later, here it was again, different room, same script. The manager's voice snapped her back. We don't have time for this. Security, escort her out. 5 minutes are up. The guard shifted closer, but not enough to touch. He looked uneasy now, caught in the tension between order and injustice. The young man filming spoke up, his voice breaking the hush. Why are you treating her like this? She gave you ID. His words rippled across the room, pulling more eyes toward the scene. Sir, put your phone down, the manager barked. The young man shook his head, steadier now. No, people need to see this. Murmurs grew louder. A woman with a stroller wheeled it to the side, whispering, This isn't right. An older man near the entrance muttered, She looks more composed than all of them. Still, Alexis didn't move. She let the storm whirl around her, let the accusations bounce off the marble, let the weight of silence do what shouting never could. Her hand hovered briefly over her phone, not dialing, not yet. Her gaze lifted, meeting the manager's eyes, cold, unflinching. Then she spoke, low and clear. You're destroying more than trust with every word you speak. The lobby stilled again, as if the building itself recognized the fracture forming. The guard exhaled sharply, the manager blinked, and the witnesses tightened their grip on their phones. Alexis Ward hadn't raised her voice. She didn't need to. The room had already started raising it for her. The marble lobby was no longer just a lobby. It had become an arena, the manager on one side, Alexis Ward on the other, and everyone else pressed into the role of jury. Ma'am, the guard repeated, his voice lower now, less certain. Please step outside. Alexis didn't move. Her eyes remained locked on the manager, unshaken. The silence stretched, thicker than glass, until someone finally broke it. Why are you pushing her out? The voice was young, shaky, but audible. The man filming from the corner had stepped forward, his phone raised higher. She gave you ID, she's calm, she hasn't done anything wrong. The manager's head snapped around. Sir, stop recording. This is a private institution. The man's voice steadied. Then why are you yelling at her in public? Gasps rippled through the line. A few clients shifted closer, murmuring. One whispered, He's right. Another shook her head, adding, This feels ugly. At the far desk, the junior associate swallowed hard. His eyes darted to the screen in front of him, then to Alexis. He remembered seeing her name that morning, flagged with an executive-level clearance he hadn't understood. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, fear sealing his throat. The clerk with the tight ponytail crossed her arms. Large withdrawals require verification, she announced, loud enough for the crowd. We're protecting the bank. But the words rang hollow. Everyone had heard the tone, the mockery, the way the manager spat phrases like people like you. It wasn't policy they were enforcing, it was prejudice. A woman pushing a stroller edged closer. She doesn't even look upset, she whispered, shaking her head. More composed than all of them. The manager, red creeping into his cheeks, snapped again. This is fraud, plain and simple. Alexis blinked slowly, then said nothing. Her restraint was its own indictment. The young man filming raised his voice. Fraud? You haven't even checked her account. You're just assuming. His phone panned across the room, catching the guard, the clerks, the crowd. People are watching this live. The guard's shoulders shifted. He glanced at Alexis, then at the growing cluster of witnesses. His jaw tightened. The junior associate's hands trembled. He typed something on his terminal, pulling up the reservation log again. There it was. Alexis Ward. Owner-level clearance. It stared back at him like a secret waiting to detonate. He pressed his lips shut, but the truth weighed heavy. The lobby hummed louder now. Phones lifted. Whispers turned into open commentary. She gave ID. This feels wrong. Why are they so aggressive? Alexis remained steady, absorbing every word, every look, every recording lens now angled her way. Her silence wasn't emptiness, it was a mirror. The room was indicting itself. Then, finally, her voice low, precise, surgical. Every word you speak is already a record. Choose them carefully. The crowd stilled. The manager's smirk faltered. The guard looked away. And for the first time that morning, it wasn't Alexis who seemed out of place. It was them. The hum of whispers had become a chorus, a steady rhythm pulsing through the marble lobby. Phones hovered like lanterns in the dim, recording every second. The manager straightened his suit, face flushed, eyes sharp with the kind of certainty only arrogance could breed. I've heard enough, he snapped, his voice slicing through the noise. This isn't a customer. This is a fraud, a con artist. Gasps cut the air. The word fraud wasn't just accusation, it was a sentence. He said it loud enough for every witness, every camera, every guard to hear. The young man filming swore under his breath. "You can't just say that," he muttered, his phone capturing every syllable. But the manager wasn't finished. He pointed directly at Alexis, his finger rigid, trembling with anger. "You think you can walk in here, flash an ID, and fool us? Not today." His gaze swept across the witnesses, daring them to disagree. "She's trying to scam this bank." The clerk with the ponytail smirked, nodding as if that settled it. "We've seen this before," she added loudly, echoing his claim. "Fake IDs, fake cards. They all think they can get away with it." The guard shifted closer, his presence suddenly more threatening. His boots thudded against the marble, his shadow spilling across Alexis's shoes. "Ma'am, step outside now, or we'll have to call the police." That word again, police. Heavy, dangerous, a loaded gun of authority. It reverberated across the lobby like a warning shot. A woman in line spoke up, her voice sharp. "She hasn't done anything wrong. You're humiliating her." The manager snapped his head toward her. "Stay out of this, ma'am, unless you want to be escorted out too." The room tightened. Even the junior associate looked pale, his hands frozen above the keyboard. He wanted to speak, the truth was right there on his screen, but fear pinned him silent. Alexis didn't move. Her hands rested calmly on the briefcase at her side, her breathing even. Her silence wasn't submission, it was discipline. The manager slammed his hand against the counter, making pens jump and heads turn. "Security!" His voice cracked like a whip. "Remove her, now." The guard hesitated, then stepped in, closer than before, towering over her. His voice was lower this time, almost apologetic but still official. "Ma'am, please, don't make this harder." Phones tilted higher. Whispers turned into open protest. "This is wrong." She gave ID. Why won't they just check?" But the manager raised his chin, feeding on the chaos. "We don't negotiate with criminals, and that's what she is, a criminal." Alexis's eyes lifted slowly, locking onto his, calm, unshaken. Her lips parted, her voice slicing through the air, steady as stone. "You're calling the owner of this bank a criminal, remember that." For a heartbeat, silence blanketed the room. Then the crowd erupted, the weight of her words slamming against every wall of the lobby. The word criminal still echoed in the air when the clerk reached forward. Her ponytail swayed as she snatched Alexis's debit card from the counter with 2 fingers, as though handling contraband. She held it up like evidence, her smirk curdling into something sharper. "This card is confiscated until further notice," she announced, her voice dripping with triumph. Gasps erupted across the lobby. "You can't do that," someone whispered. "That's theft," another muttered. The manager crossed his arms, nodding with approval. "Protocol," he said, his tone smug. "Bank property until verification clears." He leaned forward, locking eyes with Alexis. "And you won't be seeing it again until the police have had their say." The guard stepped in closer, his shadow stretching across Alexis's blazer. "Ma'am, time's up. You need to leave." His voice carried authority, but not conviction. The crowd's unease was spilling over, and even he could feel it. Alexis stood still, her face calm, unreadable. She didn't grab for the card. She didn't flinch at the threat. Her silence was louder than the manager's theatrics. The clerk slid the card into a black envelope, sealed it, and tucked it into a drawer beneath the counter. The sound of the drawer clicking shut reverberated like a jail door. Phones tilted higher. One guest spoke into his camera. "We're watching Heritage Bank confiscate a woman's card after she showed ID. This is insane." The manager shot him a glare. "Turn that off before I have you removed." But the man didn't stop. His voice rose. "No, people need to see this. She's calm, she's respectful, and you're treating her like a thief." The tension cracked wider. Murmurs grew into clear voices. "She hasn't done anything. Why won't they check the system?" "This is profiling." The junior associate's face was pale, his hands trembling on the keyboard. He stared at the line that hadn't changed all morning. "Alexis Ward, owner, access executive level." He whispered under his breath, too low for anyone to hear. "She owns this place." The manager slammed his palm on the counter again, rattling pens, making the orchids tremble. "Enough! Security! Escort her outside! Now!" The guard's hand hovered near Alexis's arm. He hesitated. Phones pointed directly at him, capturing every breath, every twitch, his jaw clenched, sweat forming at his temple. Alexis finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for her phone. Her voice carried no rush, no fear, only control. "You've made your choice," she said evenly. "Now I'll make mine." The crowd hushed, leaning into her words. And in that moment, the room shifted. The humiliation wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to them. The drawer clicked shut, sealing her card away like evidence of a crime that had never been committed. The manager straightened, smugness radiating from every crease of his suit. "Escort her out," he barked, waving his hand as though swatting away an inconvenience. The guard hesitated. Phones glared back at him like floodlights. The murmurs had grown teeth. And then Alexis moved. She lifted her phone with calm precision, tapping the screen once. The sound was small, but the silence it created was thunderous. On the other end, a voice answered immediately, crisp, professional. "Miss Ward?" Her eyes stayed locked on the manager. "Activate legal protocol," she said evenly. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They cut through the marble lobby sharper than any accusation. "Yes, ma'am," the voice replied. "Counsel is on standby. Etta, 40 minutes. Audit systems are live. Do you want full escalation?" "Full," Alexis said. The manager frowned, his smirk faltering just slightly. "Who do you think you're calling? Your boyfriend? That won't save you here." Her lips twitched into the faintest curve, not quite a smile. "You'll find out." The junior associate's head shot up, his eyes wide. He knew that voice. He'd heard it once in orientation, a conference call where senior staff were reminded of executive-level override. His fingers trembled against the keyboard. Meanwhile, the clerk scoffed, folding her arms. "Legal protocol? What does that even mean?" "It means you're out of time," Alexis replied. Gasps slipped through the crowd. The man filming whispered into his phone. "She just called in a legal team. She's not bluffing." The guard stepped back half a pace, uncertainty spreading across his stance. He wasn't sure if he was still the enforcer or already a witness. The manager slammed his palm against the counter, desperate to reclaim control. "I don't care who you called. This is my bank, and I run this branch. You don't." Alexis tilted her head, voice cool as winter steel. "We'll see who runs what in 40 minutes. The words dropped like stones into water, rippling across the lobby. Witnesses exchanged looks, whispers swelling again. "She has a legal team? This is bigger than it looks." They picked the wrong person. For the first time, the balance shifted. It wasn't just Alexis under scrutiny anymore, it was them. The clock was no longer counting down her minutes. It was counting down theirs. The lobby buzzed with a low electricity, as if every phone, every whisper, every heartbeat had synced into the same rhythm. The manager still clung to his arrogance, but the cracks were showing. His tie sat crooked now, his forehead damp with sweat. "You don't scare me," he spat, gesturing at Alexis's phone. "Lawyers, protocols, none of it changes the fact you don't belong here." Alexis finally lifted her gaze fully, steady and unblinking. The marble floor reflected the poise in her stance, a woman rooted, immovable. "You're right," she said softly, almost kindly. "None of this changes that I don't belong here." She let the pause breathe, the crowd leaning closer, waiting. Then her voice sharpened, each word a blade. "Because I don't belong in line. I don't belong at your mercy. I belong at the top of this bank because I own it." The silence was instant, total. It smothered the room like a velvet curtain dropping on a stage. The clerk froze mid-step, the black envelope with Alexis's card still tucked under her hand. The guard blinked, his arms falling slack to his sides. The junior associate's eyes went wide, not with surprise, but with recognition. He'd known, but hearing it aloud turned the weight of truth into thunder. The manager laughed too loud, too forced. "Owner, don't make me—" "Check your system," Alexis interrupted, her tone firm, absolute. "Look at the executive clearance tied to my name. Alexis Ward, majority shareholder. The reason you even have a paycheck." The junior associate couldn't hold it in anymore. He spun his monitor toward the nearest clerk, voice shaking but strong enough to carry. "She's telling the truth. It's right here, executive-level override. She is the owner." Gasps erupted. Phones tilted higher. Someone in the back shouted, "Oh my God, she owns it!" The manager's laugh faltered, cracking into silence. His face drained of color, his hand hovering uselessly over the counter. Alexis stepped forward, her heels clicking like a gavel with each stride. She didn't need to shout. The room carried her voice now. "You tried to humiliate me in my own house. You called me a fraud. You confiscated my property. And you thought your arrogance would shield you." She leaned closer, her tone dropping low enough to chill the marrow. "But arrogance doesn't outrank ownership." The clerk's smirk dissolved. The guard looked away. The crowd erupted in murmurs, half disbelief, half exhilaration. The young man filming whispered into his phone. "She just said it. She owns the bank. This is insane." Alexis turned slowly, addressing not the manager but the entire lobby. Her words weren't just for him anymore, they were for every witness, every camera, every ear. "You mistook silence for weakness. That was your last mistake." The words struck like a hammer, sealing the reveal. And in that instant, the manager wasn't the accuser anymore. He was the accused. The words still vibrated in the air. "I own it." They didn't fade, they expanded, filling every corner of the lobby, crawling into every ear, replaying in every mind. The clerk with the ponytail staggered back a step, her arms unfolding, the smug curve of her mouth collapsing into disbelief. She glanced at the junior associate's screen, at the bold line of text that confirmed everything. Her throat bobbed, but no words came out. The guard's stance softened, his hands retreating from where they hovered near Alexis's arm. He shifted his weight, suddenly just a man in a uniform caught in the wrong side of history. And the manager, the one who had barked, accused, slammed his palm like a judge without jurisdiction, stood frozen. His lips parted, but nothing came. His face flushed deep crimson, sweat tracing his temple. Every ounce of control he'd clung to dissolved like paper in water. Around them, the crowd transformed. What had been whispers turned into voices, voices into a wave. "She owns it?" They tried to throw out the owner? "This is insane." The young man filming panned his phone deliberately across the faces of the staff, narrating with a tremor of triumph. "We're witnessing a meltdown. The manager called her a fraud, and she's the majority shareholder. This is going viral right now." "Oh." The stroller woman shook her head, lips tight with fury. "I knew it," she hissed to no one in particular. "I knew they were wrong." A man in a gray suit stepped closer, crossing his arms as he stared down the staff. "This is beyond disgraceful. You don't recover from something like this." Phones hovered like a forest of glowing eyes, every angle capturing the unraveling. The junior associate finally found his voice. He turned, facing the crowd instead of his colleagues. "Her access is real. She's flagged in our system at the highest level. She is the bank." His declaration cracked through the tension like lightning. The lobby erupted. Applause, shouts, gasps. The sound wasn't uniform, but it was undeniable the tide had shifted. The manager stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the counter for support. This can't." His voice broke, brittle and powerless. Alexis stood steady in the center of it all. She hadn't moved much, hadn't raised her voice, but the room was orbiting her now. The crowd's energy pressed in not to crush her, but to shield her. The clerk dropped her gaze, shame cutting through her earlier arrogance. Even the guard lowered his head, muttering, "Ma'am," as though an apology might surface but never fully form. Every second was recorded. Every flinch, every crack, every collapse was now evidence, immortalized in pixels and data. And in that storm, Alexis didn't need to demand respect. She had already taken it back without raising a hand, without breaking a sweat. The courtroom wasn't somewhere else. It was here, in marble and glass, and the verdict was already written on every terrified face: guilty. The lobby pulsed with restless energy, the crowd pressing closer, phones raised like torches in the dark. The staff, once smug, once untouchable, now stood cornered in the very building they thought they controlled. Alexis lifted her phone again. Her voice didn't rise above the noise. It didn't need to. Authority sharpened every syllable. "Nia," she said, steady as stone, "we're done waiting." On the other end, her assistant's reply came swift and clear, amplified by the speaker. "Understood. Legal team is in the building. Audit systems are live. Do you want immediate execution?" Alexis's eyes didn't leave the manager. "Terminate their access. Effective now." The lobby seemed to inhale all at once. Then, within seconds, the collapse began. The clerk with the ponytail swiped her badge across the register. A red flash blinked back. She tried again. Red. Denied. Her hands trembled as the drawer with Alexis's confiscated card refused to open. The guard glanced at his wrist scanner. His access ID glowed red, locked out from the system. He swallowed hard, taking a full step back from Alexis. And then the manager, the man who had ordered her removal, who had labeled her a fraud, pulled his badge from his pocket, swiping at the terminal behind the counter. A sharp buzz echoed through the lobby. Access denied. Again. Again. His face drained. No, he whispered, panic thick in his voice. No, this isn't possible. It's not only possible, Alexis said, her voice slicing through the chaos. It's permanent. Her assistant's voice crackled through the phone again, official, resolute. Gregory Mason, branch manager terminated. Clara Hayes, teller terminated. Marcus Trent, security detail terminated. Their credentials are locked. Incident logged for legal review. The words landed like hammer blows, each name stripped of authority in real time, each badge rendered useless before an audience of witnesses. The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, the sound of justice being delivered without courtroom walls. The young man filming turned his camera to his own stunned face. They're fired. All of them. Right here. Right now. The stroller woman clapped once, sharp and deliberate. Others followed hesitant at first, then louder, until the lobby was filled with applause, not for a spectacle but for vindication. The manager staggered backward, gripping the counter as though it might save him. His lips moved, but no sound came. The clerk's face crumpled, shame flushing her cheeks. The guard shook his head, muttering, I didn't sign up for this. Alexis closed her phone gently, her expression unshaken. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her silence was the sentence. Power hadn't arrived with shouting. It had arrived with precision, with timing, with inevitability. And in that moment, every witness knew. This wasn't just a firing. It was justice written in real time, irrevocable and complete. The applause still echoed against the marble when the weight of silence returned, heavier this time, not hostile but reverent. Dozens of eyes fixed on Alexis Ward, not the woman they had tried to cast out, but the figure who had just dismantled a branch of her own empire in front of them. The manager sagged against the counter, his badge useless in his palm. The clerk clutched her hands together, staring down at the floor. The guard leaned on his heel, stripped of purpose, his authority dissolved. Alexis stepped forward, each stride deliberate, her heels striking the floor like a drumbeat. She stopped in the center of the lobby, turning not to her accusers but to the witnesses. Their phones hovered, recording every second, immortalizing the moment. She drew in a slow breath, her voice calm but carrying across the space like a verdict. You saw what they did. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought arrogance outranked ownership. They were wrong. The crowd stilled, absorbing her words. This bank is more than marble and glass. It's trust, it's dignity, and anyone who violates that anyone forfeits their place in it. Her gaze swept over the stunned staff, her tone steady, final. Justice doesn't shout. It arrives quietly with lawyers, contracts, and the truth. And today, it arrived here. Gasps and murmurs surged again. The young man filming whispered into his phone. She just dropped the line. That's the moment. That's the clip. The stroller woman wiped a tear from her cheek. The man in the gray suit nodded firmly, his jaw set with approval. The junior associate, still at his desk, looked both shaken and inspired, as though he'd just witnessed the career-defining lesson of his life. Alexis lifted her briefcase. She didn't glance back at the counter, at the useless badges, or at the drawer where her card remained sealed. She didn't need to, because every person in that room knew the truth. She hadn't come to prove herself. She had come to expose them. As she walked toward the glass doors, the lobby seemed to part, witnesses stepping aside, not out of fear but out of respect. The applause rose again, swelling into a roar. And when she pushed the door open, sunlight spilling across her shoulders, her voice lingered behind like a gavel's final strike. I don't need the camera. I am the ending. The doors closed. The verdict stood.